The ground has shaken somewhere in the Caribbean basin on 5 separate occasions in less than 2 weeks, and one of those quakes has already caused real damage on land. Let's get straight into it, because there's a lot of ground to cover between the seismic activity and the tropical pattern setting up around it. We had another earthquake yesterday morning, magnitude 4.5, shallow, centered just south of Grand Cayman. The quake struck at roughly 8:42 in the morning, and reports described what felt like 3 short jolts in quick succession. Some offices in the area were briefly evacuated as a precaution, but no damage was reported once the all-clear went out about an hour later. A lot of residents felt this one precisely because it sat so close to the surface, at a depth of only around 10 kilometers. That follows a similar event on July 18th in almost the same stretch of water. A slightly stronger magnitude 5.1, also shallow, sitting a bit further south of Grand Cayman. We've clearly seen an uptick in seismic activity across this corridor over the past couple of weeks, and this patch of ocean is worth watching closely. If anything else comes through, that's the kind of update worth putting out the moment it happens. Neither of these 2 quakes was especially powerful on its own, but the shallow depth is exactly why so many people noticed the shaking, especially since both struck during daylight hours rather than while everyone was asleep. It's worth addressing the tsunami question directly, because that's usually the first thing on people's minds anytime the words earthquake and Caribbean show up in the same sentence. There was no tsunami threat generated by either of these events. Here's the reason why. Both were consistent with strike-slip motion, meaning 2 sections of crust grinding sideways past each other along a fault line, rather than one side lurching sharply up or down. Tsunamis form when the seafloor itself gets shoved vertically, displacing a huge column of water above it all at once. A sideways slip simply doesn't move water the same way, so events like these 2 are far less likely to generate any meaningful wave activity. That's genuinely good news worth passing along. It's worth explaining briefly why this particular stretch of ocean produces this specific kind of earthquake so often, because it isn't random. The Cayman Islands sit right along the northern edge of the Cayman Trough, a long, narrow underwater basin marking the boundary between the North American and Caribbean tectonic plates. Rather than one plate diving directly beneath the other the way it does in a classic subduction zone, these 2 plates mostly grind past each other sideways along this boundary, which is exactly the kind of setup that produces strike-slip earthquakes, rather than the vertical seafloor heaving motion that tends to generate large tsunamis. That doesn't mean this region is incapable of producing a genuinely large earthquake. Back in January of 2020, this same general area produced a magnitude 7.7 earthquake, one of the largest ever recorded in the Cayman Trough. Even that event, despite its size, generated only a modest tasimato tsunami wave, well under 2 feet high at Georgetown, precisely because the underlying fault motion stayed predominantly sideways rather than vertical. So while today's 2 events were comparatively minor, this region has the geological capacity for something considerably larger, which is exactly why continuous monitoring here matters. There was a 3rd event yesterday too, magnitude 3.9, but this one had nothing to do with tectonic activity at all. This was a controlled experimental explosion carried out by the U.S. Navy off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida, and people as far inland as parts of Georgia reported feeling it. Different cause entirely, but worth mentioning since the shaking itself registered on seismic instruments right alongside the 2 natural quakes near Cayman. Now let's rewind a bit further, because the most significant regional quake of the past couple of weeks didn't happen near the Cayman Islands at all. On the morning of July 17th, a shallow magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck off Mexico's southern Pacific coast, near the border with Guatemala. This one caused real, reported damage on the ground, with tremors felt from Mexico City all the way to El Salvador. The U.S. Geological Survey estimated that around 6 million people experienced moderate to strong shaking, and recorded at least 10 aftershocks ranging between magnitude 4.9 and 6.0 in the hours that followed. A tsunami warning was issued for the affected coastline as a precaution and lifted once the threat passed, though officials continued urging residents to stay alert for unusual sea level changes near the coast for a while afterward. That stretch of the map has genuinely been a hotspot lately, and it's worth understanding exactly why in a moment. Rewinding a bit further, late last week we had a magnitude 4.8 quake, also shallow, positioned between the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. And on July 20th, we saw a notable cluster near Trinidad and Tobago, felt as far away as Grenada, a magnitude 5.2, followed within roughly an hour by a second event at magnitude 4.8 in essentially the same area. That kind of tight timing between 2 separate quakes is exactly the sort of pattern worth paying close attention to, because it raises an important question every time it happens. Is the second event simply an aftershock trailing beginning? The first, or is it a foreshock, a warning sign that a larger earthquake could still be coming in that same spot? Tracking the sequence and the timing behind an earthquake cluster is often where the more useful information is actually hiding. rather than just the headline magnitude number. The distinction matters more than it might seem at first. An aftershock is essentially the crust settling back into equilibrium after the main event has already released the bulk of the built-up stress along that section of fault. A foreshock, by contrast, happens before the largest rupture in a sequence, and only gets labeled a foreshock in hindsight once a bigger quake actually follows it. In the moment, there's no reliable way to tell the difference between the two just from a single event. That's precisely why. A tight clustered sequence like the one near Trinidad and Tobago earns close attention rather than a quick dismissal. Not because it's likely to be a foreshock, since most clustered sequences turn out to simply be a main shock followed by aftershocks, but because the cost of watching closely is low and the value of catching an early warning sign, if one is actually there, is high. The Trinidad and Tobago area sits along its own distinct tectonic boundary, where the Caribbean plate meets the South American plate along a system of transform faults running roughly east to west across the southern edge of the Caribbean. This is a genuinely active corridor in its own right, and it has produced significant historical earthquakes before, including a magnitude 7.7 event near Caracas back in 1900, and a magnitude 6.5 quake in almost the same area back in 1967. None of that history means another large earthquake is imminent here. But it does mean this particular stretch of plate boundary has demonstrated it's capable of producing something considerably stronger than the two moderate events just described, which is part of why this region stays on the regular watch list alongside the Cayman Trough. Stepping back to the bigger picture, the July 17th quake near Guatemala in southern Mexico sits in recent memory alongside an earlier double earthquake sequence that struck northern Venezuela, a disaster whose recovery-affected communities are still very much working through. And while on the subject of major regional seismic activity, it's worth noting that a powerful magnitude 7.1 earthquake also struck Kyushu, Japan, this same stretch of days, an entirely separate fault system on the opposite side of the planet, but a stark reminder of just how active global seismic activity has been across multiple regions simultaneously recently. None of these events are mechanically connected to each other. Different plates, different fault systems, different oceans entirely. But taken together, it's been an unusually busy stretch for earthquake activity worldwide, and that's exactly why it's worth keeping such a close eye on the regional pattern here in the Caribbean basin specifically. It's worth being clear about why unrelated doesn't mean irrelevant here. Earthquakes on opposite sides of the planet, on entirely separate plate boundaries, genuinely don't trigger one another. The physical stresses involved don't travel that kind of distance in any meaningful way. But when a cluster of significant earthquakes shows up across multiple regions within the same short window, it's a useful reminder that global seismic activity isn't a steady, evenly spaced background hum. It comes in irregular bursts, some quiet stretches, followed by unusually active ones, and viewing the Caribbean sequence in that wider context helps keep the regional picture from being read in isolation. The Caribbean corridor from the Cayman Trough down through Trinidad and Tobago has its own independent reasons for the recent uptick, reasons tied specifically to the plate boundaries running through this basin, rather than anything connecting it to what happened in Japan or anywhere else this week. Now, let's shift over to the tropical weather side of things, because there's a fair amount to track there as well. There are currently 3 separate tropical waves on the move across the region. One is passing by Belize on its way toward Honduras. A second is clipping the Dominican Republic before continuing down through the ABC Islands. And a third, somewhat stronger wave, is approaching Barbados and will continue down through Trinidad and Tobago before eventually lifting up through Antigua and Barbuda, starting with what's already falling. Scattered showers have moved through parts of Honduras tied to that first tropical wave, along with some rain in El Salvador and parts of Guatemala overnight and into the following morning. St. Lucia picked up some rain late last night as well, with a bit more spotty activity working through Martinique. Nothing dramatic yet, but a start, and frankly, a lot of this region genuinely needs the rain right now. The stronger of the 3 tropical waves is the one approaching Guyana and the Eastern Caribbean, and that one carries a meaningfully better chance of producing real rainfall totals. There's also another disturbance sitting just south of Cabo Verde worth watching, though at this point, neither of these systems is showing any signs of organizing into anything more than a tropical wave. Turning to what's happening out on the open water, Hurricane Genevieve remains a powerful system sitting over the eastern Pacific, well offshore and not threatening any coastline at the moment. Just to its north, you can still make out the remnant swirl of what used to be Fausto when Fiat has weakened significantly and continues drifting harmlessly north of Hawaii, though the islands can still expect gustier winds and higher surf over the next day or so as that system passes by. Neither the Caribbean nor the Gulf currently shows any signs of tropical development, which is genuinely good news, though some of the stronger tropical waves rolling off the African coast are worth watching in the models to see whether any of them show signs of organizing as the week goes on. It's still relatively early in the Atlantic hurricane season, and Saharan dust has been playing a real role in suppressing development so far this year, which is something of a mixed blessing. The rain that these systems would bring is needed, but not the wind and storm surge that comes with actual tropical development. For now, that trade-off is worth taking. The way that dust suppression actually works is worth a quick explanation, since it comes up so often this time of year. Saharan dust gets lofted high into the atmosphere over West Africa and rides the trade winds westward across the Atlantic in dense plumes. That dust layer C dot Moimbias carries dry, warm air well above the ocean surface, and dry air is essentially poison for a developing tropical system, since a cyclone depends on a steady supply of moist air to fuel its thunderstorm activity. The dust layer also tends to strengthen the trade wind flow itself, which can increase wind shear across the tropical Atlantic. Another factor that makes it harder for a disorganized cluster of thunderstorms to spin up into something more dangerous. So a heavy dust season, frustrating as it is for anyone hoping for rain relief, does double duty in keeping the basin quieter than it might otherwise be. Speaking of dust, a fresh surge is moving into Puerto Rico, the British and U.S. Virgin Islands, and Haiti today, with an even thicker layer expected to push into Anguilla, St. Martin, St. Bart's, St. Kitts, Saba, Stasia, and Antigua and Barbuda by tomorrow. Expect hazier skies across that stretch of the northeast Caribbean as that dust plume moves through. Walking through where the rain is actually heading over the next several days, region by region, because the pattern shifts a fair amount heading toward the weekend. Today brings scattered showers continuing near Trinidad and Tobago, tied to that tropical wave, working its way through Aruba, Curaçao, and Bonaire before continuing toward the Dominican Re. Public, though this particular wave isn't carrying much moisture with it. A separate, weaker wave is pushing toward Belize with only scattered shower potential. Meanwhile, up north, Florida and the Bahamas will see a lift of moisture, and Bermuda is due for some rain as well, with impacts stretching as far as New England. Looking ahead, that stronger tropical wave will start pushing into the picture tomorrow, bringing a better rain chance as it works through Friday, with scattered showers reaching Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Grenada, followed by Barbados later on Friday. If this system holds together, some of that moisture could push into the northeastern Caribbean, which has been running unusually dry lately. By Saturday, this wave will start breaking apart somewhat, but should still deliver scattered showers across the eastern Caribbean, with Jamaica also picking up spotty showers and storms that same day. Haiti and the Dominican Republic remain frustratingly dry for now, though improvement is being watched for. Costa Rica and Panama should see rain building on Saturday as well, along with the northern Bahamas. Turning north toward Florida and the surrounding region, today's forecast includes scattered showers across Jamaica and Cuba, along with an approaching front dropping through Bermuda, Freeport, and South Florida, with additional rain expected across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle. Tomorrow, that next front pushes into Bermuda and Central Florida with more rain reaching the Panhandle. The Bahamas will largely stay dry through this stretch, with the better rain chances concentrated closer to Nassau and points north. By Friday, expect scattered showers near Central Florida and Freeport, along with additional activity across Mississippi and Alabama. Saturday brings a better overall rain chance across the northern Bahamas, Florida, and Georgia, along with a larger front pushing through Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and a higher rain chance developing across the Carolinas as another front drops in from the north. Up in New England, today brings a strong chance of rain along with genuinely windy conditions as a swirl of energy works through the region. That same front stretches from Bermuda through Florida and back through Louisiana, while also lifting up through New England and into Atlantic Canada, bringing scattered showers along the way. Heading toward the end of the week. There are no signs of tropical development along the U.S. East Coast or the Bahamas, but another front will push through, with a piece of that energy working across the Great Lakes. By Saturday, expect a better rain chance and even the possibility of some severe weather across the mid-Atlantic, the southeastern United States, and specifically Florida and the northern Bahamas. Now for the specific rainfall numbers, since the general pattern only tells part of the story. The Turks and Caicos should stay mostly dry through this stretch. Much of the Bahamas will also stay dry, though the northern Bahamas could pie. CK up around 25 millimeters of rain. Florida is looking at roughly 2 to 4 inches in some spots. Cuba should see afternoon storms capable of producing 50 to 75 millimeters of rain. Jamaica and the Cayman Islands are looking at mostly spotty shower activity, though Jamaica specifically could see an isolated downpour. Beyond that spotty activity, though, a lot of the region stays dry and hot. Haiti remains far too dry right now and continues dealing with real water shortages. As a result, the Dominican Republic and the northeastern Caribbean are where the most hope for meaningful rainfall by Saturday is concentrated. with some spots potentially picking up 10 to 25 millimeters. Martinique and St. Lucia have already seen some scattered showers this morning, and Dominica southward could see totals reaching up toward 25 millimeters over the next couple of days. Northeastern Venezuela, Guyana, and northern Suriname are also worth watching for scattered shower activity, along with Panama and Costa Rica lifting northward, and the ABC Islands, along with Belize and Honduras, may catch a shower or two as that tropical wave continues moving through. Texas remains mostly dry outside of the Panhandle, though the southeastern United States should see better rain chances by Saturday. New England is looking at some genuinely substantial totals, potentially 4 to 8 inches in spots, with flooding a real concern given how much rain is expected to fall in a short window. Bermuda could see totals exceeding 150 millimeters as well. Breaking down the shorter-term percentage chances by location, Jamaica sits at roughly a 20% chance of a pop-up shower today. Trinidad and Tobago should see rain chances increase gradually over the coming days as one tropical wave clears out and another moves in behind it. Be right. Barbados is sitting at a 50% chance of scattered showers today and again tonight. St. Lucia has already seen its rain play out from late last night into this morning. Grenada is running about a 40% chance over the next 2 days. St. Vincent and the Grenadines sit around 0% as one wave exits and another approaches. Martinique and Dominica are both around 40 to 50% today, with showers already having moved through parts of both islands. Guadeloupe is holding steady around 40% today and tomorrow. Antigua and Barbuda sit at 20 to 30%, similar to St. Kitts and Nevis and Montserrat, where activity will stay isolated. The better news sits with Anguilla, St. Bart's, St. Martin, Saba, and Statia, where Saturday's rain chance should climb to somewhere between 40 and 50%. Puerto Rico and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands are running 20 to 30% over the next couple of days, likely just a passing shower here and there. The Bahamas will stay mostly dry outside of the Nassau area northward, where scattered showers remain possible through the week. Aruba sits around 20%, with Curaçao and Bonaire running slightly higher, somewhere in the 20 to 30% range. Guyana should see scattered rain with some isolated flooding risk, while northern Suriname is running around 40% through the end of the work week. Cuba is looking at 30 to 40% for afternoon and evening storms. Costa Rica and Panama sit around 40 to 50%, though whatever rain does fall should be heavy when it arrives. Eastern Nicaragua has a better chance of seeing showers today, and Honduras is running 30 to 40% as that earlier rain continues working through. Guatemala and El Salvador, which already picked up some rain this morning, are sitting at 50 to 60% over the next couple of days. Mexico City is running around 60% over the next 2 days, while the Yucatan Peninsula sits at 30 to 40%. Northern Colombia and parts of Venezuela should see rain chances climb as high as 60% by the end of the week. Rounding back to Bermuda, higher rainfall totals are expected there today, with the potential for that activity to linger into tomorrow as another front approaches. Central Florida and Orlando are looking at a 70% chance of rain by Friday. Tampa sits at 40 to 50% over the next 3 days, and Miami is running around 40%, though whatever falls there could come down heavy. Houston should see pop-up shower and storm activity mixed in with continued very hot conditions. So to summarize where things stand heading into the rest of the week, that stronger tropical wave is beginning its push through Friday into Saturday, and that's the system worth tracking most closely in the days ahead. There are no signs of actual tropical development out of it at this point, but a lot of this region genuinely needs the rainfall it could bring. And alongside all of that, the seismic activity discussed earlier is still very much worth watching. Given the clear uptick tracked across the Cayman Islands and the wider Caribbean basin over these past couple of weeks, if you live anywhere along this earthquake corridor from the Cayman Islands down through Trinidad and Tobago, it's worth taking a moment now, while things are calm, to think through the basics. Know where you'd go inside your home during shaking, away from windows and heavy furniture that could tip. If you're near the coast and ever feel strong, prolonged shaking, especially anything that keeps you off your feet for 10 seconds or more, that itself is nature's tsunami warning and moving to higher ground immediately. Eli is always the right call, regardless of whether an official advisory has been issued yet. Building codes across much of this region are designed primarily around hurricane resistance rather than seismic resistance, so older structures in particular can be more vulnerable to shaking age than people sometimes assume. If a notable quake does strike, a quick visual check afterward for new cracks in concrete walls or foundations, or doors and windows that suddenly stick or won't close properly, can help spot structural stress worth having a professional look at. That's where things stand across the Caribbean basin right now. An unusually active stretch of seismic activity stacked against a tropical pattern that's finally bringing some badly needed rain. with scientists watching both the earthquake corridor and the developing tropical waves closely as the week moves forward.